On his third State of the Nation address, President William Ruto is looking back at his 3-year record while placing his sights on the next 2 years and beyond. An ambitious plan to, quote, making Kenya a first world country would see the government introduce a record 5 trillion budget to cover for grand infrastructure projects ranging from roads to airports to dams and even rail transport. From the president's speech to the reality on the ground, how would that sit? Earlier in the week, ODM celebrated its 20th anniversary in the coastal city of Mombasa, where a clash of currents dominated proceedings with the party leadership splitting in the middle over, among other things, its future in the broad-based government. Sniper shots were taken, as were knives in the back, and at some point, some matters were being referred back to families. Broadly, we assess the events and the signals coming out of the ODM house. On Jamila's memo tonight, the distance between starvation in a village in Marsabit and its leaders, some operating from as far as Nairobi. On Sam's Sense tonight, turning the spotlight on the dark spaces around the public-private partnerships drive by government, Adani style. On Bonya's Bone, picking a bone with a section of clergy operating around the road to Damascus roundabout. And on My Take tonight, Kenya's long campaign journey between November 27th and 2027. The price of permanent campaigns. And on Kaikai's Kicker, Wakili, a quick one. The gang is here.
Today, I will also place before you not just a vision, but a national project that is realistic, grounded, and entirely within our reach. A vision not just to grow, but to transform. A roadmap not merely to move forward, but to rise. To rise from developing to developed. To rise from potential to reality. To rise from promise to prosperity. To rise from the third to the first world. To rise finally into the Kenya we have long imagined. The Kenya we deserve.
And welcome to the program. The hashtag is NewsGang at Citizen TV Kenya, and the SMS line is 22422. We are a different bench tonight, and we'll be talking about that in a moment. But first, the President's third State of the Nation address today. Ambitious in many respects. Jay, your thoughts?
Thank you, Yvonne. I think I'd want to first say that I like the belief that President William Ruto has in this country, in himself, and probably the people he works around with, because this is very ambitious. And I once read a book called The Burdens. And in that book, it says too much ambition might break a man. Fortunately, I want to look at it from where he's taking it and retrace the steps back to what we had, the Vision 2030. If you look at Vision 2030, it had about 4 key pillars that looked at the economy, looked at the social issues, looked at the political and governance issues around this country. And basically, it was to make Kenya, one, a higher income nation, make people live a quality life, have a very democratic and accountable structure in governance. And this has not been achieved. And here we are aiming to become a first world country. Suffice to say that the reality of all these plans, as stated by President William Ruto, are not what the common person would really want their government of the day to do for them. And therefore, there's a huge gap between the vision of the president and the reality or what the people want at this point. It would be important to look at some of the things that he's looking at. Look at food security, doing in excess of 50 mega dams, over 1,000 water pans. Look at energy, generating 10,000 megawatts.
Yeah.
Look at infrastructure, about 2,000 kilometers of road, and the amount of money that is going to take. I believe the way Vision 2030 was structured could have been the ideal way of going through this, where the vision bearers are spread across the country, and the men and women that have looked through, and the process has ownership. Because the other thing that Vision 2030 did, which I think the president in his vision may not be doing, is that Vision 2030 looked at the reality that there would be changes in government and government structures. And therefore, they did not lump everything into a short span of time, trying to achieve what the president says he really wants to achieve. So there is need to relook at this, evaluate it, and see whether it is feasible. Because looking at the presentation he did, looking at the numbers in terms of financial implication and the structure in which he wants to achieve this, it might present a very good picture, but achieving it probably would be something that might not be. So I don't know, Sam, what you think about this, but for me, that would be my assessment of this.
For sure. Of course, the president speaking about many things. I just wanted to refer to what the Constitution says of the agenda of today, which is contained in Article of the Constitution, that the president is required that once every year must report in an address to the nation on all measures taken and the progress achieved in the realization of the national values referred to Article 10. And then he must publish in the Gazette the details of the measures and progress under subparagraph 1, and then submit a report for debate to the National Assembly on the progress made in fulfilling the international obligation. So if you have to look at that very important aspect of tabling a report on the progress made in achieving Article 10. So what does Article 10 say? Of the national values and principles of governance. The national values bind every state officer, public officer, and all persons in, I'll quote this, making or implementing public policy decisions. That vision that the president was talking about is part of public policy decisions, the process of making and, of course, eventually implementation, and says that some of those values are patriotism, national values, sharing and devolution of power, the rule of law, but also importantly, democracy and participation of the people. When you listen to the president talking about his ambition for a first world country, it sort of comes off as his own ideas. The past few weeks, he has spent communicating to the country at public rallies on top of cars, saying that he has discussed with other leaders, including the late Raila Odinga, with the fourth president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and they have agreed that the idea here is to take Kenya to the first world. So if that is the decision that he has arrived at, what is the participation of the people? And the people are the people. The people are not advisors of the president. It is not the cabinet. It is not the president and his office. It is the people. So is this the start of that public participation by reporting to Parliament? But then again, the address today was supposed to be a report of what has been done in attaining the national values and, of course, the international obligations of the country as per the Constitution as it provides. But that does not stop the president from airing his ambitions. And I look at it and I think the race to 2027 has officially begun with what the president said. And why do I say that? As you heard the president enumerate the number of projects that he is going to execute, or rather, that the country needs to execute, because I do not think entirely it's his work. You could see the members of parliament that are in the house, and I have to say also that if you look at the attendance, there's one side of the house that was fairly empty. not many members were in attendance. But as soon as he was talking about listing the roads that will be constructed, everyone was, or most people were up on their feet and chanting two-term, two-term, two-term. So really, I look at it as an ambition presented to the people's representatives as a launching pad to the race 2027, making promises, but then you wonder, what happened to the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, which was the plan? It had 5 pillars. Now we have 4 new pillars. What is the progress of the 5 agenda, the 5-point agenda that was? Whether it's about inclusion, financial inclusion, if it's the question of Hustler Fund, the promise was 50 billion shillings every year. We are officially in the 4th year, so we have already done 3 years. Ideally, mathematically, 150 billion shillings should have been made available to the Hustler Fund, to the hustlers themselves. If you have to look at what has been happening, the report, according to the president, is that 80 billion shillings has already been disbursed to 7 million Kenyans, as he says, and also says that 7 million Kenyans have been taken off the
credit referencing bureaus.
Yes, exactly, the credit reference bureaus, where people could not access loans because they were in bad score. Now, that was financial inclusion. There was an aspect of food security. How well are we doing that? If you look at the figures that he's citing, that we have turned from subsidizing consumption to subsidizing production. He tells us that maize production has grown to 67 million bags. This is a claim that has been repeated by so many people, including Geoffrey Ruku, when he was Member of Parliament of Mbeere North, now a Cabinet Secretary. It has never been backed with facts. The President said today, he now brings this to the floor of the House, that 67 million bags have been harvested in the year 2024. The data, according to the same government, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, it's saying that actually we just harvested about 47 million bags of maize, contrary to what the President is saying as 67. So a reflection of the President on what he has done, but also what he's hoping to do. If you are to look at that aspect of the 50 mega dams, during the 2022 campaigns, the promises was that the government would build 100 dams, serious dams. Now that number has been reduced to 50 mega dams and 200 medium and small dams. The plan is good. The ambition is good because you want to irrigate the farms and grow more food for food sufficiency or food security in the country. But how do we get there? The other aspect that we must look at, so how do you make those decisions? Is it based on a manifesto? Is it based on wishes of the government of the day? Because again, the question of 5 trillion shillings, Jamila, and saying how it's going to be funded, how do we exactly achieve that? So I think there's so much work to be done right there. But at the same time, if you have to look at the Vision 2030 and the aspect of the economic pillar that was hoping to industrialize this country, where is manufacturing in this plan? Yeah. Because if you're hoping to get there, and you're hoping to grow the skills and innovation, that cannot happen without manufacturing. Manufacturing is the only thing that can give us jobs, because we have seen that in the service industry, we can only depend on the private sector. If you're talking about the public goods, whether it's teaching, security, health, the government, yes, will step in, but look what we're having. In the counties, they're talking about overly populated in terms of the employment opportunities. The revenues we are collecting are not sufficient to employ new people. So the only avenue is in perhaps mining, perhaps manufacturing. I don't hear the President very clear on that. So yes, we might get different ways of financing programs or projects to build all those roads that you're talking about, but you still have no jobs. So you can imagine having so much road infrastructure, logistics were well invested, but you don't have jobs. SGR is a good case example. We have it from Mombasa all the way to Suswa. How many jobs in manufacturing has that facilitated for us to say that indeed there's a real impact? I think even if this is at the initial stages, there's no clarity of thought of what that strategy is supposed to be, Jamila.
And today the President talked a lot about what we are saying about Kenya can leap to a fast world. It can be a fast world country. Let's listen to what the President said, and then we continue with this discussion.
Kenya still punches way below its true weight. This nation has the talent, the resources, and the spirit not just to improve, but to leap and to make the transition from a developing country to a developed one within our lifetime. That is why I speak today with full conviction that history has summoned this generation, our generation, at such a time as this, to a higher purpose. Some eras are shaped by events. Others are defined by the decisions a nation makes. And today, Kenya is called to make such a decision, to finish the journey our forebears began, and finally turn our long-held potential into lived reality.
You know, just looking through about what the characteristics of a first world country are. One is economic development, high level of industrialization and economic development with advanced economies and high per capita income. Infrastructure that is well developed, such as reliable power grids, efficient transportation networks, and strong internet connectivity. High standard of living for its citizens, measured by factors like life expectancy, education levels, and access to quality healthcare. And political and economic stability with a strong rule of law and a stable government. The president talked about the Asian tigers in his speech, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan, and how they achieved economic success, and how he's said in the past that he wants to get there, that those countries were at the same level almost as Kenya during independence, but they went far, they grew and did all that. And it's through a combination of export-led growth, heavy investment in education and infrastructure, strong government economic planning, and disciplined macroeconomic policies. You know, all these things, when you hear them, they sound like things that we can do, things that Kenya can start doing to achieve the standards that first world countries or the Asian tigers did. But there's a word here that says disciplined. Disciplined macroeconomic policies, discipline in investment, discipline in, you know, all those things. But I worry that as a country we do not have that discipline that is required for you to get to this point that we're talking about. Because this, as Sam pointed out, for fourth year of this administration, imeanza. And there were plans that were made in the beginning. There was the plan. At what point were those abandoned to start this new one? Because I'm thinking this is towards the end of your term. We need to start seeing tangible achievements. He mentioned quite a number. But then I'm sure in the beginning they had short-term plans, medium-term plans, long-term plans, things that were supposed to have been achieved by the end of the fifth year before the elections. How far are we with those? Because the way I've been listening, things keep changing quite a bit from one year to another. Plans that were originally made either abandoned or things have already changed. Because you talk about the Hustler Fund and how much 150 billion should have been collected by now. That is just one example. There's nothing there. So, in my opinion, maybe we should start looking at what the original plan was, like you talk about bottom-up economic model. Where did things change? How can we correct it? Because for me, I'm thinking this is too late in this term to start introducing something as ambitious as this. I know he says I think it's a 10-year plan and all. That's fine. But then you should want to at least do something that would make a difference quickly, rather than this huge, ambitious project that will cost 5 trillion. That we don't know if next year, by the time we have our next State of the Nation address, tutakuwa tunasema tumefika wapi na huu mpango ambao tunao sasa. Because what we're talking about now is different from what we talked about just a year ago. So I feel like this is too much. 4 years into the administration. By now we should be talking about we've done 60% of what we had promised when we started. And the remaining 40% we're going to achieve it this way, not introducing something new.
Yeah, Jamila, as you mentioned, the issue of discipline, fiscal consolidation is, I'm sure, a term we keep hearing about in this country. Revenue collection, upping that. But also, when it comes to discipline with our expenditure, because that's something we've been unable to do. Discipline when it comes to corruption. These Asian tigers that we refer to have been very strict with corruption. It's about closing all of those loopholes. And as we've heard of all these ambitious plans, my one question, and ambition is great, And it's good. I mean, Vision 2030 was seen to be ambitious when it was first put out there. Where does the empowerment rallies that we see, how does that fit in with this ambitious 4-point plan? Because there's millions of shillings that are being thrown in just about every village, off of every rooftop, in every marketplace. Where is that in this? Because it seems like we say one thing on paper and we do a couple of other things. And you see, it's things like those. It's 20 million shillings donations to churches, which are important. But when you look at it, there's quite a bit of money that perhaps could go to those 50 dams that we're talking about, that could go to those 2,000 kilometers of roads. But where does it go? And how do you account for that in an ambitious plan such as this one? Yes, you're empowering young people, you're empowering women groups, and others, but how does that fit into such a grand plan? Because what we do in this country is we've got grand plans that are made on podiums such as what we have in Parliament, in State House and others, but what we see happening is a completely different thing. For me, the one thing that could make all of this a reality would be very strict discipline, cut down on corruption, and that's usually hardly something you hear about being discussed. Absolute zero tolerance. You mop up so much money that we talk about in corruption. Our expenditure, where is it? What do we need to cut down? Once we do those things, you free up money. Where in all of these plans, by the way, how much are the pending bills from the national government? Over $500 billion?
Yeah, it's over 500
yes.
billion.
And that's yet to be. And that's on the national level. What about at the counties? They also owe people money. We've seen stories of people in distress because they're owed money. All of this needs to flow back into the economy. And I'm not denying that we need a blueprint and we need a vision, but at the heart of it, none of this means anything. I think, Linus, you were saying earlier about a different conversation we'd had earlier in the week about talent without discipline, about all of these big plans without discipline. If you don't have that, then all of these lofty plans are just that. And on that note, Wakili, this is your moment to make your first submission. Here on this bench, we will call ourselves a bench for the sake of this one. Wakili, your thoughts?
So, or does that make you guys a kangaroo court?
We know a good lawyer, so be careful what you say about us.
Yes. I think on this, we all sound like a really good choir. And every Kenyan who means well for this country would agree with what is being said around the table, not just here, but also some of the things that the president is talking about. And I want to pick one thing that he said today. He said that Kenya is punching below its weight. For me, that came as a massive relief that, so government is aware that we are punching below our weight. And when it comes to the economic aspirations, we keep talking about the Asian tigers. But statehood is more than just economy. There is diplomacy. Yeah. And when you look at how we've been positioning ourselves around the region, we've not only been punching below our weight, we've actually been losing weight very rapidly. We've also been losing weight economically. Now, some of the bad manners you are referring to are really costing us, because we don't need to talk about Asian tigers. Just look around the region and see nations that used to be to depend on us. We were the benchmark for development issues. What are they doing right now? You just need to go to Ethiopia and see the kind of airport they have. Think about Rwanda. You are thinking about a mini Singapore that doesn't talk about its Singapority. And we hear talking about it every time. Yet, did I hear the president also talk about this generation being the generation that needs to do something? There is a problem. When we had the young people coming out of the streets last year, it's because they think there's something terribly wrong with how this generation of current leaders is handling issues. And so there's a lot of housekeeping that needs to happen at a political stage and at the space that President William Ruto and his leadership operates. We've spoken about the issue of the Asian tigers. With the Asian tigers, I think the model was around a strong bureaucratic and technocratic government. The state is built around meritocracy. When are we going to face those questions of meritocracy in the way we form government? Because if we were to audit, if the president was to then audit using the Asian Tigers model, and specifically the Singapore model, look at Lee Kuan Yew's government and compare with the UDA, Kenya Kwanza administration. Go head to head, you know, so that you see, you know, to go to the first world, there's a script. We can't jump the queue. We can't, for example, talk about first world, yet when, well, I come up, the route I use coming here, every morning I see donkeys in an urban center supplying water with jerrycans. Yeah. And the donkey drawn carts.
Wow.
Now, the gap between that, the distance between that donkey cart and the first world is so huge.
Yeah.
Yet, it doesn't require the president talking to others. It just requires a disciplined, functioning central government. Look, politicians like a strong state. They want to exercise power. They want to stretch muscles. They do it when you have demonstrations, they tear gas people that are not even armed. Now, when the real space where you should really express your muscles, like social order, like meritocracy, we are not finding a lot of that expressing itself in this country. And he says, he talks about our human resource. Perfect. It's very, very true. But what is the Asian model about? It really invested in its people. What have we seen in the last few months? We had two sectors that are really unstable. That is education and health. Yeah. And we've noticed that the president is quite shy or reserved when it comes to those two sectors. He's more comfortable with housing, build more houses and roads and all that. And when it came to the 38-day strike by lecturers, he said, CS Ogamba, you will handle that. You see, if we do things that affect our best resource, which is the human resources, then it will affect a lot of other things. So, and when you look at previous leaders, and even before we leave the boundaries of this country, you look at what Mwai Kibaki and Daniel Arap Moi did. The one sector they never ever allowed any games around is education, because they know that is the future. That is the quality of the country going forward. In fact, those are the people that will get in the first world, because these other ones will now do the foundation, and then the older generations will get there. So there's so much that is malfunctioning in our current software. And that's why we all really wish to get there. But we have to remember that it starts with the basics. We've spoken about the dueling of Rironi Mau Summit
Road.
You know, now those are first world things. Highways like expressways, roads that where cars will go that way and others will come. You know, basic issues that actually you don't need to speak about. Now we spent 7 to 8 years between the feasibility studies and the time the launch, which will happen next week. There'll be 8 years would have lapsed, because this generation of politicians have done things exactly the same way. And you know what? Another big story that is waiting to happen as we launch Rironi Mau Summit. Have we thought of Mombasa, Nairobi?
There have been talks on that one for...
That is our second biggest city. And our leaders do benchmarking. You go to a place like Turkey, between Ankara and Istanbul, and even smaller towns. Dual carriage, by the way, it's not magic. It is where we are supposed to be. And in the absence of it, what is happening in Nakuru, the Nakuru Highway will happen. More road accidents, a lot of time wasted. Traffic jams and all that. So, for me, what I would like to hear the president do and say is, let's return to the basics. Fix the software. Get donkeys out of the water supply chain in urban centers. Use pipes, for example. Pipe that water. Do dual carriage roads, not as some aspirational thing, but it's a basic norm, it's a basic norm. This country started with a population of I think 12 to 15 million in the 60s. Now Nakuru Highway cannot handle that. We have more people making these movements. So if I were the president, you will do a return to the basics. First of all, do what really the simple things that have been done for nations to get off. And I want to just refer to something that Sam said, which is also what informs the journey to development. Our economy, our production, what can we say about our capacity to produce export products? Except for horticulture, in my view, we have not been doing well in others. And we need to, that's where the improvement needs to happen. We still import sugar, and we've had the president saying, at some point we will be self-reliant. We need that. We need to really focus on production, local production, and aim to export stuff. Only then, actually, that's what has built economies elsewhere. But more importantly, we need to go back to basics. Some of these things that we do and say, and I need to just mention this. Look at any new road made these days, even in urban centers here in Nairobi, they don't have a sidewalk. So
no bicycle lane.
No bicycle lane, no pedestrian.
No pedestrian.
Even in Karen. And you wonder, okay, first of all, our first world thing must start with our mind. The head must get there before some of this noise that we are seeing. We need a mindset shift, especially in the way we do things. Even suppliers, not suppliers, can I call them contractors, external contractors? They have now gotten used to our low standards. They do some of I've seen roads that are done by foreign contractors, and I know that is not how they would do in their nations. But they know here you can you can do shortcuts, or you can actually eliminate that sidewalk for that money to go elsewhere. And these are the bad manners that we need to first deal with before we start talking about first world. First world must start with a mindset shift.
And just to add to that, one of the things that completely epitomizes a first world country, a strong sense of values, national values. What is right and what is wrong, what is acceptable, what is not. And some of that is set, quite frankly, at the top. And it would be good, I know sometimes it seems like it's something fluffy, but that is what cascades all the way down. That is what leads to zero tolerance on corruption, amongst other things. High, working standards, optimum working standards. We don't talk enough about that. Money is important, economy is important, all of that. But having a high value system, and that comes straight from the top. So you cannot be one day saying we're going to do all these great things, and the next day you are insulting people on rooftops. It doesn't quite work the same. But creating a value system that everybody lives by, where even the courts do not necessarily have to resolve every dispute. It becomes that as a community, as a nation, as a people, as a society, you're able to call out bad leadership, and people are accountable to themselves for the things that they do in those positions of leadership. And I believe national values is also one of the things that are supposed to be addressed in the State of the Nation address, right? Per the Constitution. Sam, as we take a break.
Right, and I think it's important that we focus on whatever the president is intending to do or is saying as our vision moving into the future. It for sure needs to be structured in a manner that is easy to follow so that we carry everyone on board, because whatever it is, this bill of 5 trillion shillings will have implications not just on current generations but also future. So I know I've seen some draft legislation on the National Sovereign Wealth Fund and the infrastructure fund. So as this is being discussed or is being mentioned, there's every value that this has to be what you may want to call bipartisan sort of a discussion. And yes, even if the president says that he's been consulting the political class, this is bigger than 2-term versus 1-term. It is bigger than the current administration. It is bigger than the second. And I think the best way to look at it is to listen to the Wiper Party leader, Kalonzo Musyoka, who made some reactions to what the president was speaking and also his views about the future of the country.
They refuse to accept Rutopreneurship as the modus operandi. Our youth rejected the shift mismanagement that cost their loved ones access to healthcare services. Kenyans from across the country rejected the housing levy that is nothing short of a slush fund, a scam of the highest order. Of course, we'll be going on to clarify that as part of our agenda, we will not, of course, demolish those houses. They belong to Kenyans. We will, however, do away with housing levy, and William Ruto's government has amassed so much out of that, that will be money enough to complete even those houses. But we'll have to do away with the housing levy. More so, Kenyans are against the betrayal of Vision 2030. In its place today is bottom-up Rutoism, and one that you hear of being lauded across town today, if it's not already ongoing in Parliament, by a man who delivers nothing but despair.
In my view, that there shows you the problem of the political class steering this. Well, unfortunately, they have the right and mandate to govern when they are elected. But I think at conceiving such a plan, it should be beyond the political partyism that you will see in this country, and of course the fierce competition that you continue to see. It is a discussion that I think it's best that is approached in a structured manner, that people come together to decide, because you imagine that Vision 2030 was the product of a lot of consultation, and that was in 2008. Today, how many years is it? 17 years later, you don't hear a lot of people mentioning about it. Yet there's a board that sits to follow up on the processes. If you look at the website, there was tracking in the initial years, 2008 to 2012, 2012 to 2017. Since that time, there's no tracking that you find even on the website. So it is possible that an ambition or a vision or a political entity can actually collapse along the way because of political differences and our habits, that every political leader comes up with manifestos and promises that they want to do for the people that are usually outside of the framework that would have been agreed upon. I think the biggest manifesto in this country is the Constitution of Kenya that guides on how we are supposed to be governed, how projects are supposed to be arrived at, how programs are supposed to be implemented in a lot of transparency and accountability. If we really want to achieve this, then we must follow that Constitution to bring everyone on board. Imagine that a little contract of expanding the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport brought a lot of heat in this country. What would a 5 trillion program do to this country if you're not careful?
Let's take a break on that note. We have much more to discuss. When we come back, we'll talk about ODM at 20 and what the future of that looks like. This is NewsGang. We'll be right back.